Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis. Tonight we continue our conversations with those who want to represent you in the U.S. House of Representatives. Last week we introduced you to the candidates in the 1st District. Tonight, a look at the 2nd and the 4th. In the 2nd, the race pits incumbent Republican Thelma Drake, who served since 2004, against Democrat Nye. And we're happy to welcome Nye, who is a candidate on the Democratic ticket for the 2nd Congressional District. Nye, good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kathy. Great to be here.
This 2nd District is a huge district in terms of numbers of people within the 4 that represent Hampton Roads.
Oh, that's right. And
yeah.
it covers all the way up the Eastern Shore, all the way to Chincoteague and Virginia Beach and Hampton and Norfolk.
Indeed it does. As you've been out on the campaign trail, what are the issues that people are really talking to you about and buttonholing you on?
Well, since I got back from Iraq in December, I've traveled all over the district and proud to be here and call this district my home, and I actually grew up here in Norfolk. People are talking about the economy, and families are really having a hard time making ends meet right now, especially with the weakness of the economy. And it's the same kind of thing that I was talking to the soldiers in Iraq about. We were out there trying to serve our country, and while our families are having a tough time making ends meet back home, and that's a difficult thing for them to face. And people are also talking about how they're upset with partisanship in Washington, with people just waving their party banners. And I really think that we need to do more in Washington of bringing the kind of leadership that Mark Warner has shown us here in Virginia. Reach across party lines and work together, Democrats and Republicans, put aside our differences and really focus on just practically solving problems. That's what people are asking for, and that's what I intend to bring to Congress.
And so when you think about the practical resolution of problems, you mentioned the economy and what a hard time people are having.
Right.
What specifically would you do were you elected to Congress to resolve the economic issues that
Sure.
face us?
Unfortunately, Washington politicians have left us with an economic mess right now that we've got to fix. But you know what, the great thing I love about this country so much is that we'll get through this trouble like we always have before as Americans, and we'll emerge stronger for it. But we need some serious people in Washington who are prepared to sit down and really focus on solving problems. And what we need to do is we've got to get ourselves out of this recession. I think we need to invest in our infrastructure to help build jobs in America. We've got to pass a middle-class tax cut and a tax cut on small businesses, because that's the engine of growth that's really going to help grow our economy. And we need to focus on these things immediately and take some practical measures to move those things forward to help build our economy out of this recession. And then we've got to focus on balancing the budget and just be fiscally responsible, what our government has failed to do over the last 4 and 8 years.
One of the other key components of the economic situation in which we find ourselves has to do with energy costs, and that's something I suspect we'll be feeling quite a lot this winter. So what would you bring to that issue in Congress?
Well, absolutely, energy is a critical issue. And in fact, I met with a waterman up in Chincoteague a few weeks back who's losing his business because he can't afford the fuel for his boat anymore. So this is affecting the families of the 2nd District. We need to take some pragmatic measures to solve this. And what we've got to do is we've got to get America to energy independence. We've got to get ourselves off of Middle Eastern oil. And, you know, we're going to have a broad range of energy sources in the United States. What we've got to do is we've got to drill more. There's no question about that, both on and offshore. But that is not going to solve the problem alone. What we ought to do is take away these subsidies that we're giving away out of tax dollars to big oil companies, which are doing fine and making plenty of money and profit right now. We need to take that money and channel it into alternatives to gasoline, like new kinds of biofuels. For instance, like they're doing here right down the street at ODU, and investing in turning algae into biodiesel. That can compete with gasoline to bring the price down. And then we should invest in nuclear and wind and solar, a broad range of energies to draw from that will really help us create jobs here in America and get us to energy independence, which also brings us forward in national security terms.
And in terms of offshore drilling, what are your thoughts?
I think we need to drill on and offshore. The Navy has expressed a concern with drilling offshore in Virginia, and I would take that very seriously. I won't compromise the safety of our sailors and our Marines in that training area. So we need to make sure that we balance the concerns of the Navy, because I want to make sure that the Navy stays firmly rooted here in Hampton Roads.
You mentioned the Navy, and you mentioned that you've just recently returned from Iraq last December. There's been much conversation about the conduct of the war and where we should go from here. What is your thinking about that?
Well, I was out in the field with our servicemen and women, and they have done a terrific job out there. They've done everything that we've asked them to do. And they deserve our gratitude, honestly. But you know what else they deserve is a better strategy to get to victory quicker. And that strategy has to include forcing the Iraqi government to take more responsibility for reconciliation and for paying for their own reconstruction with their own money. I mean, Iraq is going to bring in $80 billion in revenue this year, and it's really time for us to push the Iraqi government to take the responsibility that they need to take. They've got to match on the political side and on the reconstruction side the efforts that our men and women in military have made on the security side.
And as you think, certainly one of the other key issues for this community, and we have this tremendous military community, made me think about the issue of transportation, and it's certainly something that has vexed our General Assembly, and yet the problem doesn't seem to be resolving itself.
Right.
A lot of people who are saying, gosh, you know, the federal government needs to be doing more around transportation, and so I wonder what you think about that.
Well, I agree that that Washington has let us down here, and look, we have got to grow the economy of Hampton Roads, and we can't do that if we don't have world-class transportation infrastructure. I want to make sure that the military stays firmly rooted here in Hampton Roads because it's an important part of our economy. But to grow our economy, we've got to get past that. We need to attract other businesses to come here, and they're not going to come here with the roads falling apart. And I'll tell you what, I was in Iraq last year. I saw us spend American dollars to build Iraqi highway bridges in a country that has billions of dollars sitting in the bank. And I also saw a bridge fall down in Minnesota. That is just not acceptable to me. We have underfunded the infrastructure in this country. Now we see just today that we don't have the money to build our bridges in Hampton Roads. Where's the money for 460 and for the third crossing and for fixing the bridge tunnel in 264 and 64? We're pouring money into reconstruction in Iraq. We ought to get that money and put it into infrastructure right here in Hampton Roads. And that's also a good way to build local jobs and rebuild and boost our economy. One
of the other issues that will be key in your district, because Fort Monroe is located in your district, is the future of Fort Monroe. And you know that there has been a great deal of public conversation around what should happen in that space.
Right.
And I wonder what you think about the nature of that conversation and what in your mind, as you look at that marvelous asset that is Fort Monroe, what do you see as its best and highest use?
Well, I'll tell you what, I am proud that we have such a historic treasure right here in Hampton Roads, in Fort Monroe. And I was just over there a few weeks ago. It's just a beautiful place. I saw the reuse plan, and I actually think it's a good compromise. It takes into account the need to protect the historical integrity of that facility, but also the need to have some development so we can create some jobs here in Hampton. I think it's a pretty good balance, and I was happy with that.
So you would continue to support the plan that's already on the table?
I think it's a good compromise, and as any plan goes forward into implementation, I just think we need to balance those two things. We have to respect the historical integrity of the place and allow for some development.
We have less than a minute left, but I'm wondering, as you think about the issues of housing, which certainly are a key piece of that economic difficulty that people are having, what would you do in Congress about that?
Look, this is another area where Washington politicians have let us down, and the crisis in the housing market is affecting the economy as a whole. Look at what's happening in the stock market this week, and unfortunately, my opponent has also not practiced the right kind of oversight as a member of Congress in preventing this and averting the crisis, and she had some opportunities
to
vote for some sensible regulation on the housing industry and cracking down on predatory lending, to be specific, which she opposed. And I think we have to ask Congress to do a better job of practicing some oversight and foreseeing these kind of problems before they affect the entire economy and hurt our families and their pocketbooks.
Glenn Nye, thank you very much for being with us from the 2nd District.
Thank you, Kathy. Great to be here.
Because our interview with Glenn Nye was recorded prior to the bailout, we asked him for a statement on the issue. He said he did not think the Wall Street bailout was the right measure because it did not do what he said needed to be done. That is, to resolve a crisis of confidence in Wall Street, a lack of available credit in the economy, and avoid the failure of thousands of home mortgages, which Mr. Nye says are at the heart of the problem. He argues for a return to, quote, real oversight of our financial institutions. He says we need to inject money into the credit markets so that American businesses can get the loans they need to continue operating, and we need to help those families who have the means to stay in their homes if their mortgage rates are adjusted. And now, a conversation with the Republican candidate, Congresswoman Thelma Drake. Joining us now is Congresswoman Thelma Drake from the 2nd Congressional District. Congresswoman Drake, thanks for being with us today.
Glad to, Kathy. It's good to see you.
It's a busy campaign season, isn't it?
Very, very busy.
No question about it. And right, of course, in the middle of this thing, you had this tremendous financial crisis to deal with. And I wonder, give us a sense of why you voted the way you did on the bill and where you think we're going from here.
Well, first of all, it was a very tough 2 weeks, as you can imagine, because people disagreed, economists disagreed. There was no one set school of thought that this was the right answer. And I certainly did everything that I could do to go and listen to various people, to talk with my colleagues. Certainly we heard from a lot of constituents as well, trying to understand it and put everything where I thought it should be. And my conclusion in the end, even though we did make the bill a lot better with the work of Eric Cantor and Roy Blunt, who managed to get better protection for taxpayers, better accountability, everyone agreed that executives should not have excessive pay. I mean, that everyone was in agreement on that. But I didn't feel that we were addressing the root problem, and I did not think that we had protections in place that it wouldn't happen again.
So root problem, what do you mean when you say we weren't, what do you think the root problem is?
Well, the root problem, of course, is that this was a housing issue, the bubble and the burst, but as big a problem in our economy right now, and I think we've all seen it for several months, is that America refuses to go after her own energy and have a strategic energy plan. Look at the jobs we've lost from America, look at the money that we're sending from America, look at the businesses that are leaving America because of the price of energy. And now the goal, and hopefully this bill has done it, we're still not seeing that yet. The goal was to free up credit and to allow banks to be able to lend to each other, and so they can now lend to us. So that's a great goal, but if you don't feel you have disposable income because of what you're paying to heat your home or put gas in your car, or goods and services now cost more because everything costs more for everyone, you're still not going to go buy a car, and you're still not going to go buy a new home. So I feel like it's many things combined into one, and we can't look at just one section. The other thing that really upset me was I didn't feel that we had employed some of the tools that we had in the 1980s. I was selling real estate in the 1980s when we had all the problems with the savings and loans. And I thought some things that could be done without going to such a major change as the $700 billion, as far as accounting rules, how banks value their assets. The actual reality is about 4% of the loans nationwide are in default, and about 1% will go to foreclosure. So it seems like a very big response for a very small percentage of loans that are actually going to foreclosure.
And you felt like there were other options on the table?
I felt there were other options, and I felt like we should have looked at what are we currently doing now? Are we forcing banks and companies to do things that should be undone? I mean, everybody is talking about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac making loans without requiring people to have income, without requiring good credit. I can tell you that when I stopped selling real estate, if you had money or if you had credit, I could get you a loan. But then we moved to people didn't have to have either one.
And could borrow 125% of the value of the house.
Absolutely. And then with the prices to begin to drop, that's what drove the price of real estate, is all of a sudden huge demand, same supply, and the prices just spiked through the roof. They didn't even go like that. They went straight up, and now they're reacting to that.
So $700 billion now, and the conventional wisdom seems to be that this is not the end of this thing, that this is not going to be the fix. And certainly we're seeing this week as we record this conversation, the world is now in on this unfortunate
The world, and since the bill has been passed, the market has continued to go down every day. So it shows you that that wasn't the answer, and there was a very great school of thought. It was not the answer. And I felt like it was such a major change that we needed to try to do things in the middle. Unfortunately, Kathy, there were no committee hearings on this bill. There were no amendments allowed. And when the bill came to the floor on that Monday, it was 3 hours of debate. A week ago Friday, it was an hour and a half of debate, no amendments, no committee action. And I've talked to many Democrats in the course of this and said, we've missed an opportunity to sit down together, to hear the same speakers, to hear the answers to the same questions, and together as Americans craft what's the solution to this. So it was a very, very difficult time and a very highly emotional time in Washington.
We know the bill is passed.
It is passed.
And so what do you think going forward, assuming this has not done the trick, what do you think it's going to take? And what are the things that you would be in favor of, and what are the things that you would draw the line on and say, absolutely not, we won't go there?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be very careful of how we spend taxpayer money. and to make sure that taxpayers are protected. It was one of the huge problems in this bill. And understand what happened with this bill. There were people like me who just said, we don't think this is the right answer. There were other people who, very well intended, thought that the alternative of not doing this would be worse. And so that was their school of thought when they voted for this bill. Going forward, we need to make sure we have proper oversight, proper accountability on this bill. We have got to reform this financial institution. We've got to look at everything, and the work of the 111th Congress, first and foremost, has got to be to deal with our financial situation. We may get called back sooner, I don't know, but certainly for next year's Congress, this has got to be huge reform. But we also have to make sure, I mean, look what took place with Fannie and Freddie. They were never reined in, and we're all standing here now looking back saying, why didn't we do that? Why didn't we realize that this was going on? One of the suggestions to me has been, when we took over Fannie and Freddie, why didn't we just guarantee the loans? Then you wouldn't have to worry about going in and valuing them and buying them out and holding them to hopefully sell them in the future. What a great suggestion from one of our local bankers. You know, if we had guaranteed those loans, then you wouldn't be over here buying them.
So all of these ideas then, I guess, will stay front and center because it's pretty clear this is not going to be overnight, and we're in for a little bit of a rough haul here.
Well, and then again, I think it goes back to the energy issue and the idea that we have got to create jobs in our country, that certainly energy is a federal asset that's sitting there that we are leaving untapped as we continue to run businesses out of this country because of the price of natural gas. Now, think of the Hampton Roads housing market if we had these high-paying jobs right here. So it's more than just the economy, and it's the idea of how do we create high-paying jobs and keep those jobs here.
That, of course, just those are two of the issues upon which this decision, two of the issues that people will be evaluating as they make this decision in the 2nd District. And I wish we had more time, but we have carefully crafted these interviews to be brief opportunities, and I appreciate having the time to talk more about this this financial crisis, because I suspect that regardless of all of the other issues we said we were going to be talking about in this segment, this is the thing that's going to override so much of it.
Well, it's the economy, and it's really energy, and unfortunately we've kind of pushed energy to the background because the economy is such an overwhelming issue.
Yeah.
So, but we can't lose sight of that either.
Fair enough. Congresswoman Thelma Drake, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kathy. Good to be here. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you as well. And we're back in just a moment. In the 4th Congressional District, you'll find two names on the ballot. The incumbent is Republican Congressman Randy Forbes, who declined our invitation to participate in these conversations. His challenger is Democrat Andrea R. We're glad to have Andrea R with us tonight. She is the Democratic candidate in the 4th Congressional District. Ms. R, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. The 4th is such an interesting district, too. It is quite a geographic swath, and you were just telling me you've got it figured out from a driving distance perspective. 2 hours, what is it?
Well, it's 2 hours north and south and 3 hours east and west.
And you've been going all over the district.
I've been all over this district.
And what are people telling you?
People basically tell me they're very, very concerned about the economy. The 4th District is interesting because you've got Chesterfield and Chesapeake on one end, and then it's rural in the center and toward the south.
Right.
So we've got median incomes of $60,000, and then in the center, they collapse down to 20.
Wow,
so huge range.
Yeah, it absolutely
big
is.
range.
So people are talking a lot about the economy. You are a corporate trainer by profession.
I'm actually an elementary school teacher by education.
I see.
Right, and people talk a lot about education.
And
too.
what are they saying to you about that?
Well, they're saying that they like the national standards, but the schools in many areas are not really serving the students. So we've got some areas of the district where students in the 10th grade basically being invited to leave school because there's basically nothing there for them. So we've got a lot of work to do in parts of the 4th.
How do you see that? How do you see the federal government weighing in on that issue?
Well, when you look at No Child Left Behind, when a child comes into the school system if they start out behind, they stay behind because there's no intervention and there's no remediation. So what's really critical in my district is getting together good quality pre-kindergarten education so that we can make certain that when all of our students go into the schools, they're going in with a good, solid concept of the basics. And then that way they'll be able to move forward.
And in the Congress, of course, you would deal with national issues like the war in Iraq.
Right.
And I wonder where you are on that question of the war on Iraq and its conduct.
On the war in Iraq, I basically have been against the war from the very beginning. So I have worked a lot to do what I could to end the war. And that's part of the reason why I'm running, because the current incumbent supports the war and I don't. I am also very, very concerned about the lack of oversight as it relates to how the war is managed. When you have 140,000 soldiers and 150,000 contractors, the soldiers make $30,000 on average and the contractors make $100,000. You have to wonder what's really going on. We're basically draining the public treasury into the hands of a few private companies.
And so that's a key motivator for you in running for office.
That's really a key motivator for me. And again, that's got a lot to do with the shape of our economy. We can't fix our infrastructure here because we're spending all of our money in Iraq.
And so as you think about that issue of the economy, and it's certainly something that in recent weeks we've been really dealing with, what are people telling you about it, and what would you do were you elected from the 4th to deal with those issues?
Oh, I've got a lot of ideas about that. Well, number one, basically work very hard to end the waste for contractors and the war profiteering that's going on in Iraq. Make certain that we create new jobs in the United States by rebuilding our infrastructure. Also, take a look at all the needs of the American military and make certain that their needs are all being met by American companies that employ American workers. So much of the goods that are used by the American military are made overseas, and I don't think that's right. We need to make it here from an economic standpoint and also from a security standpoint.
And as you think about the housing crisis, which is certainly another issue that's very much a part and parcel of the economic challenges that face us, what would you do in Congress to assist with the housing crisis?
Well, when we look at the housing crisis, we're looking at a lack of regulation for what's been going on in the banking industry. I was talking to a woman today, and she basically said, when we saw Enron and everything that happened with Enron, that was our big opportunity to really say we need to close all of these gaps that are in how we're handling our financial markets and regulations. And we didn't do it. And so now we're basically reaping the benefits of that inaction several years ago.
So you would then look at regulation as an issue to get at some of these economic issues?
I'd look at regulation.
Issues,
I'd look at regulation. We also have to look at the housing that we're building, and are we really building housing to suit the population that's in the area, or are we building housing to suit a population that isn't here? So now we're going to have housing that's sitting empty that people really can't afford.
As you think as well about some of the other issues that affect all of the 4 congressional districts, but in the 4th, we also deal with transportation throughout Hampton Roads, as I'm sure you know.
Right.
So what would you see as your role in getting the federal government to the point where they were more involved in resolving Hampton Roads transportation issues?
Well, when we look at transportation, one of the things I would love to see is the 460 corridors in my district. I would love to see rail down that 460 corridor, whether they run it right through the center of 460, they put it on the left side, the right side, or they run it over 460. That would be tremendous. That would also serve as a way to help people that are down that 460 corridor move into the Hampton Roads area where potentially there are going to be more jobs. Because when you get out in the middle of that rural district right now, since most of the factories have left, there really isn't a lot for people to do. But I have plans to change that.
And what are those plans when you say plans to change that?
Well, when we talk about energy, The 4th District is in a really unique position. We are in a position to become the home of the multi-billion-dollar biofuel industry for the state of Virginia. And what I'm talking about is something that's called cellulosic ethanol. Now, I have never been for food for fuel, but you can make ethanol out of plant waste. We have peanut waste, we've got tobacco waste, we've got corn waste, we've got forestry waste, and all those things can be used to create ethanol. We also have a lot of non-productive farms. We could grow switchgrass. Switchgrass yields 11,500 gallons of ethanol per acre.
We've had some communities in this region, though, who've said they're not interested in ethanol.
Right. Well, some communities may not be interested in ethanol, but it is still one of the possibilities for an alternative to petroleum products. So there are many communities that would be interested in ethanol, and when we look at what they're going to be doing with the vehicles, some vehicles are going to be gasoline, ethanol, and we're looking at a lot of different alternatives. So
well, Andrea Miller, thank you very much for being with us. Andrea Miller is the Democratic candidate in the 4th Congressional District. Because we recorded our conversation with Ms. Miller before the bailout, we also requested a statement from her on the issue. She said she would have voted against the bailout because there wasn't enough help for homeowners facing foreclosure and not enough regulation against golden parachutes for executives. She argues for a separation between speculative banking and asset-based banking. And to that end, she said that the Bank of America acquisition of Merrill Lynch should not have been allowed to happen. Ms. Miller cautioned care about what is covered under the FDIC. Quoting now, "If we have left loopholes that now ensure speculative instruments, we have basically said you can go to Las Vegas, put money on the table, and you can't lose. It's imperative that we make certain we are never in that position without stabilizing the source of the problem, bad mortgages. We have potentially set ourselves up to bail out the banking system again." We'd like to know what you're thinking about the congressional choices that face the region. Write us at 5200 Hampton Boulevard, Norfolk, 23508, or call us at 889-9437. You can also log on to our website at whatmatters.tv, and that's where you can watch this or any other of our broadcasts. You can always email us as well at whatmatters@whro.org. Next week, a look at the 3rd Congressional District and a conversation with 3 of the most popular people in America these days, the undecided voters. Thanks for watching. We'll see you then.